episode of Cultivate. We are happy you're joining us today for another conversation. And I absolutely love my guest today. She is an incredible woman. She's an amazing friend. And I'm just so blessed by her life, by her friendship. And one of my favorite things about her that I'm so grateful for is that she has a gift to care for people. And the way she cares for me, for Alex, for all of us at church, for all of us that know her, she is just that person that you can count on. She is that person that will go out of her way to make sure you're okay. And I'm just so grateful for her. Today, we're going to be talking to Lisa, and I love you very much. And I'm so grateful for you and grateful for not just what you've done, but who you are, for your encouragement, constant encouragement, for believing in us, for just being there. I'm just gonna make a note because I've been under the weather, and this is perfect proof of who you are. You came in here with medicine and with a hot tea, and that is just who you are. You are just someone that goes out of your way to care for people, and I love you, and I'm blessed to have you in my life.
I love you right back.
And I'm happy you're here with me today.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining me. And I've been able to hear your story, and more than your story, see just how your approach to life, your perspective on life. And I want to talk today about how do we move forward when life crumbles. Life as we imagine, life as we expected. We all have hopes and ideas for our lives, and I think we can all say to a certain degree, we've all been disappointed in ways that life has turned out. And so I know there's a big story there, but tell me about Lisa growing up. Tell me about how was Lisa as a child? You know, what were her hopes, her dreams? What did she dream of about life?
I've always been like a super practical person. But I grew up in a big family. I have 6 siblings, and you become pretty independent when you have 6 siblings. You know, you don't get like one-on-one attention too often. So you fend for yourself a lot. So it made all of us, I think, a little stronger and a little more motivated to get with the program, you know. Yeah. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I was in the Catholic Church till I was almost 50. And I loved that. I loved our church growing up. So
you were almost 50?
Yeah, I was in the Catholic Church a very long time, but I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
I think the Catholic Church taught me to be a disciplined person, to follow the rules. You know, we grew up with the fear of God. My parents were super involved in the church, and it was a have to in my house. But even when I moved to Miami when I was 19, the first thing I did was find the closest church. And I have been in church every Sunday my entire life, unless I was in the hospital. Yeah, it was just part of my life. So I had that. And then when I was 19, I had just finished a whole program at this hospital that I got out of high school. And I said, when I got out of high school, I said, let me look in the want ads and see where all the jobs are. They were all in the medical field. So I said, that's it. I have to go in the medical field, you know? So I applied to 7 different schools for 7 different things. I said, the first one that writes back to me, that's what I'm going to do. So I landed in this lab training program, and it was a 1.5 years of intensive training. And at the end of that 1.5 years...
In your hometown, not in Miami.
In my hometown. Yeah. And I was actually too shy to go away to college at the time. But during that 1.5 years, I kind of like matured. I was like in the lab doing lab tests and helping with autopsies and things that mature you quickly.
Wow.
And after that 1.5 years, I said, me and 2 of my friends said, let's just go to Miami to see what it's like to live in the big city. And I think we each had $500, and we said, we can survive for a month. Let's see what happens. So I came to Miami.
Wow. And growing up, were you the kind of girl that you wanted a family? You dreamt about having children, getting married? Like, what did you envision life for you? Like, what did you want from life?
I always thought that I would be married and have children because I loved that. I come from a really big family, like I said, and extended aunts and uncles and cousins everywhere. And so I always wanted a family, but not 7 children.
Yeah.
Like my mother, I knew that was in my future, but I wasn't in a rush, you know. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to see what life was like for a little while. So,
So you moved to Miami. You're 19. What happens next?
No, I got an apartment. I got a job at South Miami Hospital, and really, I'd been working on that block up until I retired a year and a half ago. I worked on that same street for 47 years. So it served me well.
Yeah. So you meet someone, you get married here in Miami.
Yes. I remember I had an apartment on Miller Drive, and I was feeling like, man, God, I really would like somebody in my life. And I was just praying that. And like 5 minutes later, my next door neighbor knocks on the door and asks me out.
What do you mean asked you out?
He asked me on a date.
Like on a date?
Yeah. And I said,
had you seen him before? I
had talked to him. Yeah.
I was like,
yeah, no. And so I said, well, God, that was fast.
Okay.
And, he was charming and came from a nice family, and we ended up getting married like 8 months later, which was crazy because that's too fast.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier with someone. Alex and I got married within a year. So that's also a little fast, but... The
other issue is I didn't have a lot of accountability around me at the time. So to me, it looked fine. He had a good job. He was college educated. His parents were awesome people.
Everything was fine.
It looked like it.
Yeah, like you could have a great family.
Yeah.
And then how was life after that? You were married for how long? Then you had kids. And tell me about that. And then what was the turning point where what you expected or what you hoped for began to fall apart?
I think after I had my second child, he had a lot more freedom than I did. I was working, having 2 kids.
Yeah,
stuck at home in between, and he had a job where he was out and about and entertaining clients, and had a schedule that wasn't predictable.
Yeah.
So, and then he also had an issue with alcohol that got worse, and that's never a good thing.
Yeah.
So
he would come home and be drunk or drink at home around the kids.
Yes, both. Yeah. So, and at one point I did ask him for a divorce, and the very next day he lost his job because of his drinking. But they decided to pay for his rehab. So he went to rehab, and I said, that's it. Then we'll go to counseling. We have a second chance. So, I was willing to keep going,
work on it. Yeah.
Keep going with that, because I believe in marriage and what you say and your vows before God. And it is a lifetime thing, but, when the other person's not on the same page, it makes it difficult.
Right. And then you find out how long into your marriage or how long after this that this isn't the person you thought he was.
Like 13 years later, I was married for 13 years by this time. We had just rebuilt our house after Hurricane Andrew had destroyed it. But he was getting sick. So I said to my husband, let's just go. I was going to go back to my 20th high school reunion. I said, let's just go back to my hometown, take a break, get out of the commotion of this hurricane, and, see if you just recover a little bit. But on that trip, he got sicker and sicker.
But he was sick from what was he ill? Why was he sick? What did he have?
He had AIDS.
But you didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
So he just got sick out of nowhere, and you guys didn't know what it was.
Right. He was just losing weight and coughing, and we thought, well, we're living in a construction zone. It's probably that. So we went on vacation. But this is how good God is, because I was working in a lab at that time doing STD screening, and I did some tests on him because I said, you just don't look well.
Yeah.
Let me run some tests. But the tests I ran were fine. So we go on vacation, and the day after we get there, he ends up in intensive care in the very hospital where I trained. So God took me to this comfortable place, surrounded by my family, when I got the news that he had pneumocystic pneumonia, which is what you get in the final stages of the AIDS virus. And at that time, they gave him 9 months to a year and a half to live.
Wow. How old are your kids at this point?
My kids are 8 and 10.
Wow.
So
what went through your mind when you heard that? Like, what was the first thing you thought about?
I was like a crazy person. I remember that the doctors took me into this little room and sat me down and told me this is what's happening. And I said, what are my chances of having this? Mm-hmm. They said 50-50.
Wow.
So that's pretty high, 50-50. And they said that he had probably had it for 8 or 9 years at this point.
Wow.
So the fact that I was exposed for 8 or 9 years was scary.
Of course.
And my kids had to be tested. I had to be tested for 3 years following that. And he ended up living 2 years.
After that?
Yes. So, yeah, it was a very scary time. It did rock my world because he had a whole life going on behind my back that I never knew about. He had a whole gay lifestyle going on behind my back that I didn't know about.
How did you find out all of this? After you found out, of course, his diagnosis, but then was it you're asking him questions? Did he come forward and tell you what was happening?
He didn't come forward at first.
He didn't.
He
told you he didn't know how that.
No, he told me he didn't know.
Wow.
But then when I brought him back home from Pennsylvania, and we were at the house, and he got a phone call from a friend of his. And that's the time when you pick up phones in the house, right?
Yes.
It's 1993, so there's no cell phone. But I picked up the phone in the bedroom, but it was a friend of his, and I yelled out to him to get the phone in the family room. And I listened, and he was telling the guy, "Hey, listen, this is my diagnosis. You should get yourself checked." So I knew then that that was the guy in his life. Yeah.
And you approached him about it, and he denied it? Did he?
No, at that point, he couldn't deny it. Yeah. But at that point, I didn't want to be married to him anymore.
Of course. So you got divorced?
I did.
And how was trying to process that you're young, you have 2 young kids, and everything that you imagined for your life, a family, caring husband, a father for your kids, that it had just
crumbled for
sure.
Yeah, it was tough. I was overwhelmed. I didn't have a lot of support. Just that fear. Like, I had to be tested like every 6 months, and I didn't think about it too much in between testing, but every time I got my blood drawn, I'm thinking, what if this is the time?
Yeah.
But I had called, I called my insurance agent when I got back. I said, listen, I have to increase my life insurance because this is what happened to my husband. And while I'm still negative, I need to protect my kids. And he called me back and said, Lisa, your husband refused the physical 8 years ago to up the life insurance policy on himself. So he had known about it 8 years prior.
So he knew that.
He knew about it. So that caused a whole nother layer
and a next level of betrayal and anger that he would purposely
expose me to that.
Knowing this and the kids.
Exactly.
And how were the kids? How did they process that in their minds, in their young minds?
They loved their dad, but it was still tough. They were losing their dad.
But they didn't know exactly why, did they?
Well, I took them to a grief counselor to tell them not exactly like how he got it, but that he was dying, and they had to know he was dying because he was.
He was, yeah.
And so we did some grief counseling, and they handled it the best they could. It was tough.
Yeah, because
my daughter had to grow up a little faster than she should have had to, and my son dealt with a lot of depression and alcohol abuse because of it through the years. So yeah.
Yeah, I imagine
has a rippling effect.
Yeah, absolutely, and for you, the pain that comes not from finding out about your husband, finding out about this lie, finding out about the possibility of you being or your children, then having to deal with your pain and having to deal with the pain of your children as well, which makes it even more complicated and deeper.
And the fact that I was an emotional mess. I didn't really deal with my kids probably the best. I mean, I did the best I could, but I know that they suffered a lot. And maybe if I had handled some things differently, they would have.
But you did what you could with what you had in that moment.
For sure.
And it was also traumatic for you. So there's only so much you could do at that point.
Right.
So in this situation, where was God for you?
Wow. I've been a believer as long as I can remember. Mm-hmm. And I could say I trusted God, but did I?
Were you angry at God?
I was mad at God. I was mad at God. I said, God, I was a good girl. This was the only guy in my life.
Yeah.
And this is what happens?
Yeah, like if this would have been anyone's story, it wouldn't have been mine.
Right.
Yeah.
And I actually, instead of saying to God, thank you that I don't have this disease that it could have killed me too and left my kids orphans, instead of being super grateful, I was angry and resentful because that shouldn't have happened to me.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
But then now I see the other side of it. Like God continues to use my testimony.
Absolutely.
And through that, I've had to search for something deeper. I've had to search for like God, you're enough for me.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about the ugly side of life is that in the middle of the worst things, the worst news, that there is still something worth fighting for, that there is still something worth living for, that there is this God that still has a plan despite whatever life circumstances. But how did you not? Because I feel like sometimes when people go through difficult situations, an approach that people could have is, why did you do this? God, why did you do this?
Yeah.
And it's shifting that perspective is that God doesn't do this necessarily, is that we live in a fallen world and life happens, and life happens to all of us the same. The same way that it happens to you, it could happen to me.
Right.
But how not blaming God in that sense and saying, well, you did this. And that's when I find that people have the tendency of abandoning their faith.
Well, bottom line is I married quickly. So, I made mistakes along the way too. I also grew up in a house where you weren't really free to express like your needs, your emotions. Like I feel bad. Like okay, you feel bad, so get glad again. That would be my mother's response. Like, why do you feel so bad? Like that wasn't a thing in my home to express your emotions. So even through any relationship I ever had, I was never able to like strongly express like, oh, I need this, or
because you just didn't know how to.
I didn't know how to, and I didn't feel like I could.
Yeah.
So you end up being somebody that people kind of take advantage of sometimes. And the other fact that I came from like a super small town. I mean, when I moved to Miami, there was more people in my apartment building than my whole hometown. Okay. So it was like, I thought everybody was honest.
Yeah.
I thought everybody was kind. Like my dad and my brother and my uncles, I thought men were like that.
Right.
So
yeah, you never imagined that.
I never imagined that people could like roller coaster your life like that, So
now you find yourself broken, in pain, dealing with this situation, trying to take care of yourself while at the same time trying to take care of 2 kids. At what point did you go back to church, go to the Christian church? Like, how was that transition?
Yeah. Well, actually, as soon as I got back from that trip to Pennsylvania, I went to talk to my priest. And although I have loved the Catholic Church, the priest was like no help to me. I told him what happened, and he said, wow, that's a big problem. I don't know what you're going to do.
Wow.
So I said, okay, well, thanks for the help. I'll see you. But I knew at that point that I needed more.
Yeah.
So I just started like, searching places and, but it doesn't matter how many churches you go to. If your heart is blocked off like mine was, nothing's going to sink in.
Because you were searching for help.
I was.
For hope.
Yeah, something.
And you eventually walk into a church and you're part of it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I actually went to a more charismatic Catholic church, and that helped me too, because, I needed, my spiritual life needed something, because my personal life was going down the tubes, so yeah, I just kept at it. I never gave up on church.
Yeah.
But did I really surrender my heart to God? It took me a long time.
When you mean surrender your heart to God, in what sense do you mean it? Your pain, your anger, your
that, and like, let me try and do it God's way, and I don't have to do everything my way. It doesn't have to be all on me. It's not. I don't have to be so strong. You know what I mean? I can.
Yeah, be okay with not being strong sometimes.
Yeah. Be okay with being a little crazy. Be okay with being mad. Be okay with I'm going to deal with some resentment. Yeah, I'm going to deal with anger.
What was the turning point for that? From going to,
I remember exactly when it was. I was at a women's conference in some church. Don't ask me which one. I don't remember where I was. But something came over me like, God, I give up, because I think my son had just relapsed again. I had him in a couple of programs for the alcohol abuse and stuff like that, and he had just relapsed again. And I said, I give up, God. Take it. And then right after that, I was invited to, I was in a small group at Calvary. And that's where I really finally got some support and some help that I really needed to move on. But let me tell you, I hung on to that for a long, long time, many years.
Why? What would you say you couldn't let it go?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because you were doing the right thing. You're in the right place, doing the right thing, seeking God, but yet your heart isn't necessarily changing.
You're definitely I was just going through the motions, Go to church, do the worship, read a little bit, but mostly I was just super busy working, taking care of my house, taking care of my kids. My son is crazy. I'm, trying to deal,
navigate. Yeah.
So it was just,
So when
did
that change? When did you realize something in my heart needs to change, or I need to do something different?
It was probably 12 years ago when I just decided to, I went through Celebrate Recovery, and I had to deal with my hurts and really investigate why I reacted like that, why I let so many things happen to me, because I allowed things to happen to me too. It wasn't oh, you did this to me. No, I allowed it because I didn't ever stand up for myself too much, But it wasn't until then that I was able to say, no, this is what I need in my life, and I need this support, and I need these kinds of friends, and I need, certain way for people to act around me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it's recognizing what you needed and being honest with yourself.
Right.
Because I think sometimes we can become blinded to our own feelings and situations, and they become so normal to us because that's just how we feel, that we just think that's how life is, and it must feel this way, and that's what I have to deal with for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I always figured, well, you got to handle life on your own. That's just the way it is. Nobody's going to do this for you. Nobody's going to do that for you, and forget it. You got to do it, And I'm still a little bit like that,
You are very... What's the word? It's not independent, but I can see how you're not very emotional. You are, but you're not. You have emotions and feelings, and you feel deeply and you care deeply. But Alex and I joke about it. You can tell you the most exciting news and you're like, oh, that's great. You're just, or terrible news and you're like, oh, okay. You're very just... here in your emotions.
I don't overreact.
You don't overreact. No. You definitely don't. But coming to a place where you do have to address those things in your life and looking in and starting that process, what helped you to go through that healing? Because healing isn't always pretty, and it isn't always painless. That's the thing that sometimes I feel like we think about healing. We think that healing is this pretty journey where, you know, it's just God's just healing me along the way, but it requires hard work, and it requires revisiting things in our lives and being honest about things. So how was that process for you?
I think it's about finding people in your life that are going to love you no matter what. No matter what you say, no matter how you feel. On your worst days, they still love you and accept you. And I found that at Calvary. I really have felt like I'm part of the family there, and people do care about you and love you. And that makes it easier, to say like, man, I feel like I really feel bad today. This is what I need. I need whatever it is. I need attention, and I'm able to say that, like, I need some of your time, which I was never able to say that before.
Yeah. So finding a different space where you can do that. And so as I think about people who might be watching right now, and they might be facing a situation like that, maybe not your specific scenario, but maybe there's a woman who finds herself now alone, taking care of her kids. Maybe there's a woman who's grieving a relationship. Maybe there's a woman who's dealing with an illness. So many different things.
Yeah.
And I think we know life isn't perfect, but we sometimes don't think that certain things can happen to us until we find ourselves in that situation. And life is not easy. It's not always pretty. It has pain. And what would you say to that woman that might be watching right now and is right now going through that process of, my life has just crumbled, before my eyes, and where do I go from here when I just have broken pieces all around me?
I was listening to a Bible study last week, and it was about, like, we're all waiting for something in life. You're either waiting for a husband, waiting for a job, waiting for whatever it is to, something to come through for you, or waiting for your children to leave, waiting to graduate, whatever it is. We're all waiting for something in life. And, like, what do you do while you're waiting? Are you going to wait well? Are you going to, like, and know that you don't have to wait alone?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That we are waiting in life, but we don't have to wait in a, like, oh, I got to wait. No, you wait more excited about things. And I think, like, for now in my life, like, I'm finally learning to, like, appreciate, like, every day a little bit more, because I'm focused more on, like, my spiritual life, my physical life, my emotional life, that it all has to be in line, and anytime I feel like out of place or lonely, I have to remember God is enough for me. God is enough for me. And there were years when I had to, like, keep a scripture in my pocket. I always did that, especially when I was, like, in the recovery program. I just, like, keep a scripture in your pocket, because even if I didn't, like, take it out and read it, I knew what was on it. And if I felt it there during the day, it reminded me I'm not alone. God has this promise for me. And just to accept that they really are for me, those promises. I was reading last week in Leviticus, I think it was Leviticus, and how God is so meticulous on how he wanted everything set up, right? He gave every specific detail about the temple and the tabernacle, everything like that. And I'm thinking, if God is so particular about that, and now I'm the temple, he does care about every detail in my life. He's particular about how I am, my spiritual life, my physical life, and my emotional life. He is particular about every detail.
Yeah.
That blessed me so much. Like when you think that we are the temple, and he cares that much about the temple. And now I have this whole, the Holy Spirit in me, that I have that power. And sometimes I think we brush it off. Like, yeah, I have the power of the Holy Spirit in me. Like, that's incredible, but we don't always think about it. We just go on with our life like we can handle everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's That's like mind-blowing.
Yeah. So a person that's going through something like that right now, feeling shattered, their dreams are broken, what are some practical ways that you can say they can start a healing process and a moving forward process?
I would say be accountable to somebody. Stay in the Word. And there are seasons where you're so distraught that you don't even feel like reading the Bible, but maybe listen to some good podcast, or, even listening to a teaching, whatever it is. Like, there are seasons when you can't sit down and concentrate on a book, but you can listen to something. But stay in community for sure. And it is so important too and I've just gotten, like, since I retired, I really have noticed the difference in, like, my morning time, because for 47 years I rushed out the door in the morning, and this year I decided, no, I'm not going to rush out the door anymore. I'm going to spend the first part of my day with God. And it really has made a difference. And I used to be like, oh, that's legalistic that you have to spend the first part of your day with God, but maybe it is a little bit, and maybe people don't have time in the morning because they're trying to get their kids out the door and all that stuff. But it does make a difference for me. I notice it. Like, the rest of my day is a little bit different because I've taken that time in the morning. But
to spend it with God.
Yeah, and even if you hang on to one promise, it's going to make a difference. You know,
and I think it helps us along the way to believe that there is more beyond the heartbreak.
Yes.
Because sometimes I think these things, and you must have felt this way when this happened, that your life is over.
Well,
in a sense.
Like,
like where do I go from here?
Yeah, like, I definitely did not trust men. Like, even like, I couldn't stand to hear a man talk.
Wow.
Like, it was like that. It's like, no, I don't want to hear your voice. Like, I was like cringing because I just felt so betrayed by that, and I shouldn't have been, because I grew up around, like I said, very trustworthy, loving men, but I let this one person, like, change my perspective.
That's good, yeah.
So I gave him all that power that he didn't deserve to have.
Yeah. That's really good. We could do that. We could do that with people.
Yeah.
We could allow one experience to completely just overshadow all the other good things in our lives.
Right.
And run with that.
Right.
And that's a dangerous place to be. And I'm thinking, as I see you, that maybe at that moment, as much as there was pain or despair or even questions as to what the future would hold for you, that your life wasn't over because of that. I see your life, and you have a full life.
Right.
You have a life that is thriving. You are someone that is really involved with people and their lives, and you invest your time and your wisdom into their lives. So I don't see you as someone who, yes, that was difficult. Yes, that was, a loss. Of course, a huge loss. But it didn't take away from your life. Like, you are still living your life. You are still living out your call. You are still, it's not like because that one dream or that one hope died, that the rest of your life died with it. And so there was a responsibility on you to move along with it and to take the steps that you needed to find healing. But that there is something good on the other side of something terrible, and that there is hope. And I think right now you continue to encourage people through your testimony, through your story. And that's the whole point of these conversations, is that God can turn the most terrible things in our lives, and somehow, as only He can, turn them into something else that is good, that serves a purpose. And I definitely see that in your life, and how He's used you in so many ways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us, sometimes we get hung up on, like, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? We all have the same purpose. It just looks different. We all have the the calling to bring other people to love Jesus the way we love Jesus, and to show his love to other people. That's everybody's calling, isn't it? I mean, so it just looks different for everybody. But when I think of all the little ways that, when I look back, like God spared me from this, God saved me from this, God moved me on from this, like when I tell you, when that happened to me, when I got that diagnosis from my husband, I was in a lab doing those tests myself, and I'm drawing blood on a woman who had the same issue, but she ended up getting HIV. And she was only exposed for 6 months. I was exposed for 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
So I said, man, God has a purpose for me.
Yeah.
You know, God saved me for something. I can't throw that away.
Yeah. Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. That's powerful. Sometimes our eyes go to that thing that went wrong, to that failure, to that disappointment, and we can't allow it to define our lives, because there could have been so much more that could have gone wrong. But God will use your story, the bad, the ugly, and make it into something
and even
beautiful.
My kids say, like, Mom, I'm glad we went through what we went through. We're better people because of it. We're stronger, and we're this, and we're that. And they really are. They're resilient people.
Yes. I think the struggle makes you a better person.
Yeah.
When you struggle, when life has hit you, when you've experienced, it just does something to your soul. But it presents an opportunity to, either you're going to crumble and let this crush you and crush you, or you're going to rise up to the occasion and just let this be a stepping stone to propel you further, and to say, I'm going to use this to do something with it. Yeah. And I think that's a mentality. It's not easy to turn that and go to that, because there's real pain, there's real hurt, there's a fear. But having the right people around you, and always bringing yourself back to that promise of God, that he will be with you, that he does have a plan to prosper you, to give you a hope and a future, is that reminder that I can do hard things in life. Yeah. Life will be hard, but I can do hard things with the help of God. And those things won't define who I am or my future.
Yeah, like the Bible says, that to everything there is a season, and there is a season for grief, and there is a season for being mad, and for, like, being a mess.
Yes, absolutely.
People have messy seasons.
Absolutely. And I think to a certain degree, it's needed. Like, sometimes nobody likes to be in that messy season. Right. Or in that season of you're just dealing through, suffering because there's pain. But there's a space and a place for all those emotions that you need to feel. Yeah.
But that's where accountability comes in, though, because when you linger in some of those seasons too long, you need a little push.
Absolutely.
I needed a big push. Like I said, when I came to Calvary, I was standing in a big hole, and I got yanked out because people loved me and took notice and cared for me and saw something in me that I didn't see in myself at the time, and it helped. Yeah.
So as we close, how would you today encourage someone who is currently dealing with a painful situation, with a situation where their dreams may have crashed, crumbled? How would you encourage them to keep moving forward?
I would just say that, sometimes our dreams for our life aren't as good as the dreams God has for us. So if we keep that in mind and know that God loves us more than any other person in the world, more than we love ourselves, more than we can imagine, and that he cares for every single detail, and he's been there through every single circumstance, that just trust him and surrender it, because until you let it go, if you keep hanging on to it, God can't work through that. You got to let it go a little bit and let God do his thing, because, it was me trying to do it on my own strength and and it wasn't strength, really. It was my weakness that helped me there. But God pulled me through, and I had to see that, and I have to always remind myself, God is enough. God is enough.
Yeah.
You know, I'm loved by him. That's all I need. I can do everything else through that love.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing
Of
your
course.
story with us today. And I know that there's people watching that are encouraged by it and that are going to start making changes in their lives.
Yeah.
And believing that there's a hope for their lives.
Amen.
Thank you. I love you. And thank you for joining us today. And I hope that this conversation encouraged you. And if you're watching today and perhaps you are going through something similar, maybe not the same situation, but you find yourself at a place where you can say, my dreams have crumbled. My life is not turning out to be what I expected. I just want to encourage you today to believe that there's more beyond that disappointment, that there's more beyond that hurt, and that ultimately God has the last word and that God will not disappoint you. And so I would encourage you to surround yourself with a good community, with friends, with people that are going to encourage you, with people that are going to tell you whenever you need to toughen up a little bit and make some strong decisions and change your mindset. Allow people into your life. But most importantly, believe that God is not done with your life. And that there are people that are rooting for you, that are supporting you, that are praying for you. And so we are going to be praying for you for whatever situation. If you have a prayer request and there's something that you're going through right now, leave us a comment, let us know, and we would love to pray for you and join you as we believe that there are better days for your life and that the best is still yet to come for your life. We love you. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.